amateur presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled streaming review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, I don't think we could have had this conversation about What If Season 3, which is late in terms of reviews, and we're going to be covering the whole season and have a spoiler conversation. But in order for both of us to have this conversation, I think what you needed to do, and you have done, and you have really committed to this, is that you needed to watch Killers of the Flower Moon on a trip to LA on a plane in order to balance the Martin Scorsese Marvel conversation and see it from a clear view.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Eric. What if I told you I was lying in a hotel room what if I told you I was lying in a hotel room in LA? I'm getting over a cold. I'm running off 3 hours sleep.
And
all you can see is my double chin and my mustache as I lie in my hotel room drinking a cold brew that I walked like 45 minutes to get at Dunkin' Donuts. And I watched Killers of the Flower Moon. I mean, we're going to talk about What If season 3, but the whole, you love your Martin Scorsese. I'm surprised you're not wearing it.
I was too lazy today. This is my version of being lazy. The way, and
we're not on video, right? Yeah. We're not on.
We don't have to impress anyone. You all know where my alliance.
No one needs to see this double chin as I'm lying in bed too.
It's so
hot. The way Marty intended it on a 4-inch screen on the back of a fucking plane seat with horrible audio through. I had good headphones on, but just the way that the Air Canada app, the screen quality, we were on one of the newer Air Canada planes, so it was actually one of the better ones. But you know what? The flight was 4.5 hours. The movie's 3.5 hours. So I was like, you know what? No better time than now, because when am I going to just be trapped somewhere for 4.5 hours to force myself to watch that? So,
on your own too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think Nevis wanted to watch it at some point, but we just never got around to it. So, that's probably, I'll save that opinion, what I thought about that movie, for another day.
I thought you were going to say a rewatch of The Brutalist on your next 4-hour flights.
I respect the sanctity of the Brutalist, so I will watch that in a theater. No, I'm not. I love Marty. And there's something coming up that I can't wait for you to watch that I don't think you have watched yet. I'll just tease that. That's really
because you're embargoed too. So
have you watched it yet?
Not yet, but okay. I will.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about.
Okay, it's great. It's really good. It's in Killers, it's my third favorite Martin Scorsese performance from this other thing and is it Shark Tale he's in?
Shark Tale.
What is he?
Yeah, he's in Shark Tale. Yeah, with
that's
De Niro and Will Smith.
Oh God, we're off the rails. All right, What If season 3?
The DreamWorks animated movie that nobody remembers except for Martin Scorsese as like a puffer fish
with big eyebrows. Yeah, great stuff. Great performance. Okay, What If season 3? The finale. I guess you can kind of consider these 3 seasons sort of a trilogy, a kind of pseudo anthology series from Marvel, where you have based off the comic series of alternate universes where it's the Marvel universe we come to know, but something is slightly changed, or maybe the entire universe has changed. This is the 3rd and final season.
I think you just repeated what Jeffrey Wright, as the Watcher, says at the beginning of every episode perfectly, verbatim.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how he describes it every episode. I think we've reviewed the other 2 seasons, or at least the first season. I remember
the first season. I haven't actually seen the second season.
Oh, really? Okay. So you missed, you know what? Even watching this one. Okay, everyone, we're going full spoilers on What If season 3, just so you know. There's, all 8 episodes are out now on Disney Plus. They came out day by day over the Christmas break, which they did last season as well. Eric, I think you should, I mean, go back and watch some of season 2, even if you like. Here's the thing, I'll just get right into it. Like any anthology series, episodes are going to be hit or miss, right? And I
Yeah.
think your enjoyment is going to vary based on what characters are involved, the subject matter or setting, what kind of twist on the universe that they do. And then on top of that, what I do like about What If is that they've had this kind of ongoing narrative throughout, where each episode is basically self-contained. However, the entire season, sometimes in those final couple episodes, will take some of the characters from that season and utilize them in a finale that usually includes the aforementioned Jeffrey Wright, the Watcher. So we kind of get the culmination of all 3 seasons in this, of the Watcher, and how he's supposed to be watching and how he kept getting involved in each season. So I thought overall this season and this series as a whole, really, like, I think it's a great concept. Um, I, I've enjoyed it overall, but it's fleeting, right? Like, they're kind of like very passive watches to me, and I'm a huge MCU guy. I this should be completely right up my alley. I think some things uh, I I remember saying in season 1 that I still kind of agree with, and my opinion hasn't changed. Don't love the art style. I think at times it can look great in certain action sequences, and sometimes when they've added some kind of hand drawn effects with explosions and different things like that. That sometimes it looks quite good, but there's something off about that kind of cell shaded art style, especially coming after X-Men 97, that I think is so gorgeously animated in that perfect 2D, 3D kind of art style, that the animation still doesn't quite work for me. And I find it has to kind of work overtime for me to get invested in each episode because of that.
Well, no, you have to work overtime, I think, to acclimatize to it. I think you
To the
have to,
animation, yeah.
yeah, to the animation, because there's a janky quality to the animation in how certain characters will turn or move in certain ways that actually
Yeah,
reminded me of Reboot. And
sure.
that kind of took me out of it a little bit. But I don't mind the animation style being, cell shaded, as you mentioned, but also being something a little bit different from, like, say, Pixar, or like
Totally.
something that feels a little bit different. I think my biggest problem, you mentioned the anthology thing, which we always talk about when it comes to any narrative that is telling multiple stories within the framework of one film or TV show. But I think there's also maybe a disconnect here because it's not canonical or canon to the live action stuff, and
I mean, just to cut you off there, I mean, I think it kind of is. I think it's in the same multiverse, right?
but
Where
it never felt like any of the stuff that we were seeing in that series was brought into the live action in any
yeah,
capacity other than
except
like
for
with the
Captain
Watchers.
Carter, yeah,
Yeah, but Captain Carter was like a different version of Captain Carter, and I think also
sure.
people have gotten a little bit sort of maybe spent on the multiverse now, where maybe, because I was this supposed to only be 3 seasons, like it does feel like this was something originally planned to be maybe longer or ongoing.
Yeah,
And
I don't know what the plans were. I'm sure that it probably takes a lot of effort to do the show, even with our the janky animation. No offense to the animators, they're working with the time frame that they're given and the style that they were given. But yeah, you know what, I don't know. I'm sure as it was going, they probably were like, all right, we've kind of maybe used all of our A ideas or even some of our B or B minus ideas, and maybe we should just pause for a little bit or finish this story up with Jeffrey Wright's The Watcher and what his story, and Captain Carter, really her story throughout these 3 seasons. It's almost a Captain Carter trilogy, right? I know she's not in every episode, but it's very much her story with Jeffrey Wright's The Watcher, Uatu, The Watcher, throughout these 3 seasons. So, I think probably during season 2, they were probably like, we should probably just make this a trilogy, like basically 3 seasons, and kind of just don't overstay our welcome, because I feel like, to our point, and to my point that I just said, like, some episodes I think are great, are genuinely great, that I was like, I love this. Like, it's one of my favorite Marvel things. And then there are some where it's completely forgettable, or I'm half watching it, or I'm tuning out, or something like that. Right. So I really think that it was probably smart to go, okay, we had these couple characters with, the Doctor Strange, with Captain Carter, and then a couple original characters, which we'll get into, Birdie in a second.
That
a
is
bit.
weird too, and I want to talk about that, but I want to quickly just go back to
Yeah,
the
please.
canonical thing of it all. The reason why I also brought up like why I find like it almost feels disconnected from the MCU as a whole is because you look at like what James Gunn is doing right now and setting up the DCU, and it does feel, with Creature Commandos, even though I haven't watched it, he's been very, adamant about saying in the press releases and in any interviews that this, any of the animation, but even the video games, is all continuity. Like, it's all a part of this world. Where with Kevin Feige, it never felt like he was not against What If, but it never felt like he was saying like, yes, this is like actually has an impact on this story or the MCU as a whole. Like, he wasn't like outright dismissive or like ignoring it like the bastard children that is the Sony Spider-Verse.
Sure.
But there is a feeling of like, oh, maybe more people would have watched What If it was really like, if the point was put home that it is all like, it really is connected in terms of like everything.
We might see, some of this come into play with Doomsday and Secret Wars, right? And like, that's going to be the interesting thing moving forward. And we've barely talked about the episode so far, and we will, but moving forward, if they use a lot of this stuff in the finale of the multiverse saga to make things more important than what they were at the time. Do you know what I mean? Which could hurt them in the end, because if you bring in elements from What If or other things, even some of the other Marvel shows that maybe didn't perform as well, and utilize them in those movies, it could either do one of 2 things. It could either go, oh shit, I should go back and watch that. Or it could be like, who the fuck are these people? And like, or something like that. So I do think it's technically canon. I also think it's okay that it's just tangentially connected, right? Like, I just like the idea that there's an infinite multiverse, and I know some people won't like that, because it means like, well, they're fighting an, multiversal enemy in these what are they called? Not the Ultimate Watchers at the end. They're not engineers. There's like the one guy's name has a name. I forget what it is.
Jason Isaacs.
Yeah, is it Jason Isaac? Yeah. Or, I forget what it is.
I thought you were going to say the Ultimate
Eminence.
Warrior, because you're in kind of a WWE Raw mode right now too.
The Eminence, like that fight with the Eminence and them at the end, and you have this multiversal Avengers team with some original characters and some multiversal versions of characters. I'm like, technically, what's happening at the end of this series is a bigger deal than what we see in Endgame and Infinity War, because Endgame and Infinity War are one universe, and on top of that, it is the whole universe because it's 50% of the universe, but like basically a battle on Earth, right? Where here you have a battle for like the fucking multiverse, and like you have them fighting these guys who can see everything and want to like it's interesting to me where technically it's a bigger deal, but it feels way less of a deal because of how it's kind of showcased. And I think,
and it's the most cliched, I would say, as well, because like the final episodes that you're referencing in this season feel like the most and we'll get into it more, but it's like the most conventional beats within the superhero storytelling in general when it comes to, oh, we have characters punching each other for, an exhausting amount of time.
I thought it
And
was cool. Like, I mean, I thought it was animated really well. I liked that last battle. I agree with you what you're saying. I
yeah,
just like it is punchy, bright colors, whatever. But sometimes in my idiot brain, that's all I kind of need, especially with a show like this. Especially when you're just trying to kind of wrap things up, and that's kind of on top of that. It does feel like they're just trying to wrap things up. Like those last two episodes kind of do come very quickly. I almost it to what you said earlier of like, did they plan it on being 3 seasons? It almost seems like they didn't, and they were just like, okay, well, let's wrap this up now. And where in a different world, or maybe what if there we get a whole maybe season just building up those final 2 episodes, right?
and
And
that
like,
I think would
oh,
work better overall. Like I think, like, even if you had like every season building up to something in the same way, because it does feel like that's what the formula was outside of the
yeah.
anthology aspect of it.
And if you had maybe however many seasons, 3 seasons building this up, and then one whole season that was less anthology and more, or even a movie, right? Like even a 2 hour, hour and a half, hour 45, hour and a half, what if kind of culmination film. I actually like that's on Disney Plus. Maybe could have worked a little bit better for me. Like you build up these 3 things, and then you have a little bit. I needed a little bit more character development from some of the like from Birdie or from Kahori. Like Kahori's episode in season 2 is good, which you missed. So that character would have just come out of nowhere for you
So
as
did
well.
America Ferrera's character, and I think she was in the
Um,
last season, or was it this season only? Her
no, I
deputy
think
character.
yes, it was just this season. I think maybe I'm wrong. Sorry, this is how fleeting the show is.
I'm going to look that
Um,
up while we're talking,
yeah,
just to
please
confirm
do.
that.
And I'll go more into the season, but I just think maybe those final 2 episodes did feel a little rushed to me, even though I liked that they kind of, had this continuing narrative. Cause I think even without that, it would have just completely been fleeting, right? Like, I think if you didn't have each season building up to those final episodes, having some sort of like kind of connection throughout some of the episodes, I think a lot of this would be forgettable. But that being said, sorry, go ahead. Did you
Oh, I was
interrupt?
just going to say that she was only in the one episode as Ranger Morales, but it is interesting that you introduce a recent Oscar nominee in this kind of buddy comedy, on the run, on the lam short, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, like, is this a character a bigger deal, like within the multiverse or within the MCU, and like, why is America Ferrera voicing this character now, or is that character going to come back? And you're talking about Birdie and like the crew for Captain Carter is another strange thing as well in this third season, because the way they build other characters like Riri Williams in her segment, which is probably the strongest,
I loved
and
that episode. I will throw
and
that
it
out
is the
there.
darkest, and it is the one that feels like, okay, like I could understand why the Watcher intervenes. But then even, like having Cowboy Shang-Chi, it feels like, okay, well, those characters are characters where the Watcher is intervening, so those worlds have been affected, so maybe those are characters that you would bring into the fray when it comes to those final 2 stories with Captain Carter. But then you're just like, oh no, instead, obviously we got the episode with, Howard the Duck and Kate Dennings
Howard
Darcy
the
character.
fuck, man.
Well, I mean,
Howard
that
the
was
fuck.
I think that almost is an in joke, because that was always the thing with the live action movie, right?
Was that
Because
Howard the
it
Duck
was Leah
fucked?
Thompson and Howard the Duck had a relationship, and the
I think that's always been in
bestiality
the
jokes,
comics
and
too, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And like the other thing is that Howard the Duck the movie is like this weird like anomaly that was it's considered one of the worst movies ever made, and it's only really remembered now because George Lucas was an executive producer. Like, I think if it was made now, it would still be a weird terrible film, but I don't think it would have it would be as memorable because we've gotten so many superhero movies that are bad. Like, I would love a what if episode that was poking fun at the Sony Spider-Verse movies and be like, what
Yeah.
if there was no Spider-Man and all these horrible films one after another? You know, that would be great. Like, that would be
Yeah.
fun. But I do feel like those last two episodes, and even like the last two seasons, because the last two seasons do the same thing as well, even though I haven't seen the second one, I was reading up on it. It does feel like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too when it comes to, let's be
Yeah.
both an anthology series and tell these individual stories that are self-contained, but then also, to hedge our bets, let's have some connective tissue at the end of a season for an episode or two and bring it all together in a way that maybe, entices people to finish the season.
And that's what I just said, though, because like I think both things can be true. Where I think without that, I don't know if I'd remember much about this series. So it was probably smart on their part. I'm not sure, but I also see what you're saying, where it's an anthology series, but then it tries to have this ongoing narrative that feels kind of loose because it's just the watcher, and and yes, he picks and chooses characters to kind of involve in the finale of each season. So you brought up the Riri Williams episode. I do think that is the best episode. I want to talk about that for a second too. And another thing I do genuinely like about the show, and again, I don't think any of this is necessarily bad, and I actually do like the concept of the show, and I do mostly enjoy it when I'm watching it. I just very much think it's such a fleeting watch. I do like, because if you're a really hardcore MCU fan and you've seen every single thing and every show and watched multiple times, I feel like it is really fun and rewarding for those people. But I think if you're not one of those people, I could see this being like who the fuck is that person? Or you go, wait, is that from Ant-Man and the Wasp, and is that Walton Goggins? Is that whatever? Like, I really like where you're like, oh, it would be fun if this person interacted with this person and this person with this person, or this group of characters together. And because we can't just willy-nilly, until we probably get to Doomsday and Secret Wars, throw those people together, because voice acting is a little bit easier to get people just to record on their fucking iPhone, what they were doing in the pandemic or whatever. Now I'm sure they're going into actual recording booths. It is, I think, really fun to have different characters interact that you haven't seen interact yet, right? And I, as a huge MCU fan, that's actually is a big joy of watching this show. A con to that, I hate that they don't get everyone. You know what I mean?
Or when they
Like,
do get some people, they're used in a way that's so slight. Like, it felt like, oh, Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight
has 3 lines in that
has 3
episode,
lines
doesn't
and
it?
is in one scene basically, and it's like, oh, that's it for that character in this world. And like you said, like, we'll probably see him again in one of the Russo brothers movies. But it does feel as though, like, even some of the characters that they choose to have, like the first episode, when it's this creature feature Power Rangers Mecha Gundam Wing style short, like, it does feel like this is also, that episode is pushing the Anthony Mackie,
Captain
Captain America
America,
thing
yeah.
after, Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, in a way that is, it's like, guys, remember, we've got this movie coming up. Please see it.
He's
And
Captain
Anthony Mackie,
America
like,
now, yeah.
even in animated form, Anthony Mackie just does not have the charisma or the dynamic to play a lead.
Yeah, I
And even
agree.
in that short amount of time, I don't think Mark Ruffalo is that great in this episode either. Like, it did kind of feel like he was literally phoning it in.
Oh,
um,
there's a lot of people that you can tell who are good voice actors and who are actors who are trying to, like, just who don't know, like certain things are very stilted and very you can tell it's people individually reading their lines and not actually interacting with another human. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, and like yourself, it sounded almost like Mark Ruffalo was recovering from a cold,
Yeah, yeah.
and not recovering from, mental health issues that the character. And that's clearly what the episode's also about. It's about, fighting those demons that you're running away from, that are inner demons, and talking about therapy and psychology. And it's a very on the nose episode in terms of like visual representation and, the character dynamics, even though like the scale and size of it is interesting. And, the Power Ranger dynamic of, the superhero story also is
Yeah, it was basically
worthwhile.
Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim Avengers, right? And
Yeah.
then yeah, it was okay. So it started off kind of all right, and then you go into what if Agatha went to Hollywood. So you have, Catherine Hahn and Kumail Nanjiani. You have Dominic Cooper coming back as Howard Stark, and yeah, again, completely forgettable episode to
Well,
me.
that's
Like,
where the animation doesn't work, I think,
yeah,
because the dance numbers look so they they don't have the flow of the Busby
yeah,
Berkeley, sort of golden age Hollywood, or even pre-code era Hollywood
and then
sort
even
of
the Bollywood stuff
style.
too, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it feels like it's trying to be as dynamic and as kind of, fluid in motion as possible, but there's this almost like a lagging quality to the dance numbers, where like it's almost trying to catch up with the last movement as it's going on to the next. And so you're kind of thrown off. And some of the puns and the humor, it's very much like this is a, classic Hollywood
yeah.
predicament. And it just kind of wears itself thin very quickly in terms of like what it's doing, and even like the happy ending, aspect of it, and that's Hollywood for you, and all that.
Yeah.
It's just it's very shallow.
Yeah, it didn't really work for me, didn't really, dig it. Then you have What If the Red Guardian stopped the Winter Soldier, so that's, having, David Harbour coming back as Red Guardian, um, coming to America to stop Bucky before he kills Howard Stark, and then that kinda spins off into the big thing. Again, these first couple episodes, the first four, even the Howard the Duck thing is memorable because it's weird. But those first three episodes are just completely like, it was really hard for me to get into the show because those three just like back to back to back. I was like, "Ugh, I don't really care about these concepts that much. Like, yeah, it's kind of fun to see some of these characters. There is the Russia connection with Winter Soldier. Seeing, Lawrence Fishburne's, Goliath playing a Shield agent. That's the episode with America Ferrera as well.
Yeah,
Um,
because I thought I had missed something there, like having even
no,
said, because it just seems weird that like you have like this big name who again like just comes off of getting an Oscar nomination for Barbie and is thrown into this. It's like, oh, did I miss something from the last season? Or are they setting America Ferrera up in terms of like talking about continuity or canon, for something more? It's just strange that someone like that, who hasn't been in any of the other ones, in comparison to say like you have a voice actor that isn't Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr., and then you have to replace them with, like voice actors.
yeah, which is the most distracting part of the show when that happens. So those three episodes kind of very forgettable. Then you get into What If Howard the Duck Got Hitched. Um, so a whole episode about Howard the Duck and Darcy, which is technically a continuation from
Season one,
multiple,
right?
yeah, season one, the Party Thor episode. So it's Howard the Duck gets married to Darcy Lewis.
A lot of Vegas stuff in those in
Yeah.
episodes 2 and 3,
Oh,
right?
that's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. Um, this is a weird one. I will say that I like some of the weirdness. I like some of the character interactions in the latter half of the episode. Of everyone,
Seth Green is gainfully employed again.
yes, exactly. I mean, he's been doing Robot Chicken for so long, right? So
Yeah.
like, this is his jam. But um, I like everyone going after their egg that Darcy birthed. It's so weird. And
See,
then
if it had the courage of its convictions, it would show the birth scene. It would be,
exactly.
if David Cronenberg directed this thing, it would be all
Just
body
Darcy
horror.
laying an egg. So I kind of like, all these characters going after this egg. This egg is special. You have, Josh Brolin coming as Thanos. You have Loki playing, you have Tom Hiddleston playing a fun version of Loki. You have Michael Rooker in there. Here's a Grandmaster awful.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just
the
so
actor who's
distracting.
replacing Jeff
Uh,
Goldblum. Yeah, it
um,
basically like the first episode. As we were mentioning, you mentioned Pacific Rim, like Godzilla, these kind of things. The second episode is old Hollywood. This episode feels like it's basically a version of it's a mad world where everybody is after the same
yeah,
thing, and then you would know it
Rat
probably is
Race. Yeah,
Rat Race, right? And that's
yeah.
what that feels like.
Yeah, and I kind of dug it. It was weird. It was interesting how they then brought this character into the latter kind of couple episodes of the series. Even though that feels, we'll get to that when we get there. So then, is what if the emergence destroyed the Earth? This is my favorite episode of the series or of the season, and quite possibly my favorite episode of this series. I think it's exactly what I want the show to be. And not that I want everything to have the same tone or whatever, even though this is a very matte episode with the kind of post apocalyptic, kind of cyber punky kind of interesting. Like I love everything I talked about of having interesting different characters all interacting with each other that wouldn't normally have interacted with each other, an interesting unique universe, a really dark interesting story, a really creepy cool villain of using Quentin Beck and Mysterio from Spider-Man. And it's just like it lined up everything I thought the show could be, and I think absolutely kind of nailed it. Even with the with the watcher intervening at the end, and his narration of seeing how he's watched this over and over and over and over again, and she fails each and every time, and then him finally wanting to get involved, I think was a good launching off point to those final couple episodes. And I just thought Dominique Thorne, like this did more for me with her as Ironheart than I think even Wakanda Forever did. And I just thought I would have loved if it was Jake Gyllenhaal. I know it's an older Quentin Beck, so I was kind of okay with the guy who did the kind of old Gyllenhaal, old
Yeah,
man
if it was
Gyllenhaal.
the younger version, I think it would have been more distracting. But I don't disagree
Yeah.
with you. Where it does sound like he is trying to mimic it a little bit, but because it is older and the voice is supposed to be more monotone, that isn't really a problem
Yeah.
in terms of what it's going for there, or at least it's not as distracting as like a comedian or a voice actor doing a bad like almost stand up version of Jeff Goldblum.
Yes, exactly. So I'll just finish up my thoughts here. Like, I just thought, Quentin Beck taking over Stark Industries, having Vision as this kind of creepy ass, like kind of, henchman,
Terminator.
and yeah, Terminator. The team of like Wong, Okoye, Valkyrie, Riri, Yingnan, and like I thought it was really fucking cool. I really, really loved this episode, and this
You
is one
really loved it.
I really, really like it. And this is one that like Nevis doesn't watch the show or anything. It doesn't really do much for her, but she likes the MCU and will watch the movies and stuff. And this is one episode that I was so all in on that I want to just go, okay, you don't have to watch anything else in this season. I just want you to watch this episode because I think it's really good.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Like I think it is the best of this season, and it also felt like the episode that follows with Cowboy Shang-Chi, which I also didn't mind.
I
Uh,
liked it, yeah.
but it feels like that is similar as well, where it's like you've got a very kind of dark story about oppression and slavery and racism and darker elements, but it's coming after probably one of the more bleaker episodes of the show, especially with the watcher telling you how horrible it always is to go back to this one story again and again and again. And it's like, okay, we get something similar. That's not one to one, obviously, but it does feel like there is like, okay, if the Riri Williams episode wasn't there and we got this episode would feel a little bit more sort of like impactful. And not that it isn't, because I think like there is the sort of sibling dynamic that works in the last act, and the darker elements of even like Walton Goggins' character in terms of like, the reveal with him, and like, and I like Haley Steinfeld, and so like having and Simu Liu also feels like I kind of liked him more in this than I did even in Shang-Chi the movie, even though I like Shang-Chi the movie, but I felt like he was pretty good in terms of being charismatic in animated form. So yeah, I didn't love the kid particularly. Like it did feel like,
I agree, yeah.
it feels like we have to, like these kinds of movies, like almost like the Indiana Jones films, we have to have a kid sidekick, or, like the child perspective of like the next generation in there, and that maybe doesn't work as well. But yeah, I think those are probably the two best stories or standalone stories within the narrative. But it is also strange because it is these are the two stories that the watcher physically intervenes in, and so you think like, oh well, maybe one of the characters from each of these stories will be integrated into the continuity of the final two episodes and play a part in some way or another, and they don't, which,
Yeah.
like that, it's an odd choice. And then it's like, okay, well, instead we're gonna, again, like with the America Ferrera thing, Natasha Lyonne, we're just going to bring in a new actor who, like, I know Natasha Lyonne's
Who's also in Fantastic Four.
but is she playing a different character, or is she going to play Birdie, or is it just going to be a multiverse thing where it's like, oh, she's playing a different character in both of these and you can kind of get away with it?
Yeah, I think it's probably that. Which is, I don't know. I just like, are there only fucking 5 actors in Hollywood? Like,
well, I mean, there's
feel
actually 4. Pedro Pascal is playing, 7
yeah.
roles, right? So
Yeah, I just with the Birdie thing, I agree with you that they probably should have had Simu Liu or Haley Steinfeld or someone, and Dominique Thorne or Ironheart, or like put together that team, even round it out a little bit more, because like I think even bringing in you have a Kahori, who I think is a good original character, and her episode is quite good.
But that's
in
another
two.
confusing thing, because Devery Jacobs voices her, right?
I know,
And
who's
she was
also
on Echo.
Echo. I know that, which is, I guess maybe that it's all of this is intentional, of like the multiverse stuff, especially when it's going to be really interesting what they do with Robert Downey Jr. and Doom, because when you have these characters playing multiple roles in the MCU, in a multiverse that's all canon, it does get. I'm sure most people don't even notice. To be
Well, there's a lot
honest,
of people,
like,
I think, that don't even watch this. I
that's
think like
true,
that's
yeah.
the one thing where like even we've talked about it before. Like I know your mom's a big fan of the MCU and
Yeah.
watches yearly. My mom loves the MCU as well, but this is like the one part of the MCU she just does not care about. Like I always say to her, "Oh, have you watched everything?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I've watched all the shows and all the movies." And I said, "Oh, you watched What If?" And she said, "No, it's animated."
Yeah, see, that's like, my mom says that too. It's something about the animation that people don't take it seriously, right? And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, but I don't blame them either. And what we're saying is almost like, yeah, you probably don't need to watch this. Maybe I'll tell you to watch the Riri Williams episode, or something like that. But you don't necessarily. It's not necessary viewing, right? Unless something from this. Like the Watcher could possibly play a part in, and I'm sure he will play a part in Doomsday and Secret Wars. I really do think that they'll probably have Jeffrey Wright play, a motion captured version or something of Uatu. It won't be like a big thing, but it'll probably be there somewhere. And
Well, we've seen Watchers before
yeah,
in
in
what was it,
Guardians and
Guardians? Yeah,
yeah, with Stanley and
yeah.
stuff like that. So I do think that you're gonna see him get involved, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kahori and Birdie do play a part in it, or this will just be its own thing, and that's also fine.
But
I
it
don't
is
think
weird
that
then when you
either.
have even Jason Isaacs, because Jason, not that it's like the same exact thing, but Jason Isaacs was in Elektra. He's
Sure,
one of the villains in the
which
first
technically is
scene.
canon now.
Yeah.
Technically canon.
So, but then it goes again to like the whole thing of like casting in general, whether it's
Yeah, I
voice
know.
actors or live action, and excluding the intention of the Robert Downey Jr. thing, which is obviously polarizing. It does feel like there's no creativity or inspired choices anymore. Like it's all like we have this one pool of talent and we just keep going back to them. And it's not just the MCU. Like even with the announcement of Jason Momoa as Lobo in
Oh yeah, I
Supergirl,
mean
like
DC's doing it, everyone's
yeah,
doing it. It's fine. No, it doesn't really matter. It's a different character. Um, who gives a shit ultimately? But like, it's
even Russell Crowe in
yeah,
Craven
yeah,
and
I know, yeah.
in Thor, Love and Thunder. Like
That's
it's
true too. Yeah, I mean,
or
there's so
Chiwetel.
many Oscar Isaac.
Yeah,
There's so many people. Like X-Men. There's a bazillion people who have played multiple things. So it's not necessarily a new thing.
no.
So yeah, you get these final couple episodes, which have a kind of a continuing story about the Watcher being basically tried for his crimes against the multiverse because he keeps getting involved. So you have this kind of multiversal kind of Avengers team with Captain Carter, Kahori. You have Storm, the goddess of thunder. So you basically have Allison Seeley Smith, who voices Storm in X-Men '97.
Which was great.
Um,
She has an amazing voice,
oh,
and it's
she's
always great
amazing. I
hearing
like that
her.
they're
So
yeah, and I do think it's kind of cool getting some X-Men characters involved, especially because X-Men '97 kicks so much ass. And I like that it's a whole team of women as well, which is very, very cool. But like, it just feels kind of thrown together,
yeah,
and
it feels like a
I
grab bag, basically.
yeah, like it's just, and then you have Birdie, which you just kind of go, oh, that's the grown up egg from that episode, right? Like you're
Yeah.
just kind of you're like, oh, because in that episode they hint that she's going to be very important and very powerful, and you kind of just have them thrown together. It feels like, and it. I would have liked a little bit more build up with that team, and I know we have gotten that with Captain Carter and Kahori and stuff like that in previous seasons, but uh I like bringing back Infinity Ultron because I really did like that episode and the finale of that first season. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, these final two episodes, I thought there was some fun action, some good animated stuff. Um, but ultimately, it did feel kind of rushed.
Like the last
And
season of Game of Thrones, where it kind of is like, oh, they probably needed more time with this material to get to the point where Amelia Clark's character makes that sort of dramatic turn to being a villain, and then kind of like changing the landscape. And it just feels like, oh, you almost needed like a whole season dedicated to rounding up these characters, or just like bringing in Riri Williams, or Cowboy Shang-Chi, like people like that have been established a little bit better in this season, or feel like they are going to be brought back, and they just aren't. It is such a strange
like to
thing. Like,
choose Birdie as the egg from that episode to be like, oh, well, that egg was so important in that episode. We have to have this new character.
Yeah, Darcy wants
Um,
those calorie-free donuts. Gotta
yeah.
get
Oh,
that in there to
yeah.
remind you that the parents are calling her.
Yeah, so that's how we remember that, right? And even bringing Doctor Strange Supreme into it, I think is kind of interesting too. So to kind of bring those big key moments from all these different seasons and having these through lines of these important characters, at least in the Watchers multiverse that he's looking at, right? Like who stood out to him and made him intervene, right? Like it was very much his story. And I think multiverse stuff can be tricky because it's something I might have touched on earlier in the episode and we've talked about a lot. I know some people can tune it out because they go, well, if it's an infinite multiverse, right?
Mhm.
Um, why does any of it matter, right? And I always argue that because people will go, well, why? That means nothing in Infinity War and Endgame mattered because there's a universe where
Like the Sony
everything,
Spider-Verse,
like,
nothing matters.
sure. Yeah. But I go, well, it matters to the people in that universe, right? And it matters to those characters. It's real to those people. It's real to those characters. Like you can still get, emotion and a great story, even if like there's an infinite multiverse where, it happened fine, blah, blah, blah. Like every little detail is changed and there's so much of it that none of it matters. But I think some of this will come back into play, right? Like even the Doctor Strange looking through millions and however many versions of the end of Infinity War, and it said it has to be this one way of Tony sacrificing himself at the end of Endgame, and I think that will come back into play with the Doctor Doom stuff, right? And I do think that they're leading to something, and even something like What If that feels fleeting or not important will ultimately come together. Now, did they do this all properly to make people care about the multiverse enough? I think at times, yes, at times, no. It's been a little messy for sure. And we've kind of seen people's interest wane in the MCU, I think. But also Deadpool and Wolverine, a big multiversal movie, was a
And it's
giant
also
hit,
changed a
right?
lot
So
too. I think Marvel, not that it was their fault, but they had to pivot with the Jonathan Majors stuff and the Kang sort of situation, because I'm sure the what if of that story could be, okay, well, if Jonathan Majors wasn't who he became or what he is, would the Kang story, would we have Robert Downey Jr. as Doom in this, as we're building to these new Avengers films? It does feel
I
a
think they would
little.
have tried. I think they were always trying to bring back most of the OG Avengers. Like, not to, I don't think these would be spoilers. These are more predictions. So, anyways, mixed bag for What If. If you want to leave now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think might happen in Doomsday and Secret Wars. If you don't want to hear that, I don't think that they're necessarily rumors, but we know some casting and stuff like that. So if you don't want to hear any of that, bounce out now. 3 and a 2 and yeah, like I do think that the plan was to probably always try to get back most of the OG Avengers as this kind of dark Avengers team. I think is probably the route that they're going, but I could be completely wrong too. But with the announcement that Chris Evans is coming back and our Robert Downey Jr. is coming back, I really do think that they're going to have this new versus old, and bring back a lot of these actors as like dark variants of themselves and have this version of Doctor Doom, which is an Iron Man variant. Maybe get, a Hydra Captain America. Maybe you'll have there are multiversal, basically evil versions of each one of the OG Avengers, right? So if there was a way to bring all of them back, and then you can also have them play their good versions again too, right? In whatever way. At this point, who fucking cares, right? Bring everyone back, resurrect people from the dead. Who gives a shit? Like I said before,
What about Craven? If they bring Craven with his
yeah.
vest
Oh, he's
into
going to be the
this?
most important character in the multiverse saga. But I still think if they were doing Kang, that probably still would have been a part of it. But I don't know. I think it could be, obviously bad dude, not great stuff there, and I'm kind of, it's great that we moved away from that and him. But I think it could be a blessing in disguise with the Robert Downey Jr. stuff. I know it's going to be divisive, but and it's not going to be for everyone, but at this point, this is all very silly. Uh, why not play on, almost 15 years of, I think almost more than 15 years now, of history.
We're coming up to
Um,
almost 20 because Iron Man was
yeah.
2008, right? So
Oh my God. By the time, Secret Wars comes out, it will be 20 years. Right. So, um, yeah, so I'm fine with it all. Who it's all silly. The people who are still all in on it will enjoy that stuff, and then the people who hate on it were already going to hate on it. So I'm fine with it. And I think What If, to bring everything full circle, is for the sickos like me, right? The
yeah.
people who are hardcore about the MCU and want to consume every little thing and go, oh, what if these characters interacted, or what if this happened? And that's ultimately why the What If comics started, is for the Marvel Comics sickos, and now they have a TV version, and it's not going to be for everyone. And even for the hardcore fans, you're going to have episodes you love and episodes that you think are forgettable, and it really just depends on what characters are involved and what setting is there. And yes, the continuing story throughout the 3 seasons, was the build up there? Well, when you only have 1 or 2 episodes per season that kind of take characters from the previous episodes and utilize them in some sort of finale, and use that as your building blocks for, the culmination of this trilogy of seasons. I would have liked maybe a little bit more build up with some of these original characters like Birdie and Kahori, and putting that team together and stuff like that. But overall, I think there's some standout episodes like the Riri Williams episode, the Ironheart episode, and the Shang-Chi Western, I think is kind of fun. So it's not did you get the new link? Did I send it to you? Okay.
Hold on. Yeah,
Either,
I'm looking at
you're
it now.
fine.
Yeah, got it.
This is behind the scenes, guys. But yeah, so I'm kind of a mixed bag on it. But I think ultimately, if you're an MCU sicko, you there's some stuff there that's to be enjoyed.
Yeah, the Riri Williams episode is the diamond in the rough, I think, for people that aren't necessarily even fans. But if you were to recommend one, like you even did with Nevis, like I think that's the episode to give a shit to, a shot to. And I think you're saying that this is for the sickos, and I think uh Morbius and Craven and Madam Web and Venom are for the
Or for the
terminally ill.
masochist, yeah, the masochists. Like, oh God,
Because I'm still trying to figure
those.
that out, other than for the reason. The only reason is that Sony wants to hang on to the rights of those characters and be involved in the process of making those new Spider-Man movies with the MCU or with Marvel, and making money. Like, it ultimately comes down to making money.
But
But
they
all
didn't
the
make money off those
choices,
last couple movies, man.
no, they
So.
didn't. And all the choices that they've made with those films are just mind-boggling creatively. Like, I understand, even if this doesn't work all the time, why they did this.
And it always seems like they're trying, at least
Yeah.
with the MCU stuff. Like, it feels like, they do have, an architect with Kevin
Architect
Feige. I'm
Adrian
losing it,
Brody
guys.
is the architect.
Trying to kind of maybe steer the ship, and much like James Gunn's trying to do with the DCU right now with the Sony Spider-Man stuff. It's just like,
Well, even the DCEU made
yeah.
sense in terms of, like, it was competing against the MCU and trying to catch up. The Sony Spider-Verse movies with the villains, again, other than holding on to the rights and making money, there was no clear direction of, like, where any of that was going, or
Or
what
what they
they
were trying
wanted
to
to do.
do. Like, yeah, like, oh my God, we haven't. We could just start talking about Craven at the end of this,
I just
because we're
want
not
to,
gonna.
because it's such a bizarre thing. And like watching that movie, like obviously, you know, we've heard about the reshoots and things like that, but then when you watch it, it's not only choppy, you know, considering all the behind the scenes turmoil, but there are scenes where characters' faces look like they've been mapped over with like an
No,
AI generated.
their lips, dude. The
Yes.
lips. The ADR is even worse. It's like
Ariana
they watched.
DeBose in particular,
Oh
there's
God,
one scene in
they
Craven's
replace her
Fortress,
lips. They
and it's
replace her
awful.
lips, dude.
It's as bad as Tahar Rahim in Madam Web. But it's more
Yes,
noticeable
but
because it's brighter looking at times.
yes. Well, with him, they didn't even try to change his lips, right? They just
They did the
ADR'd in his
Conan
lips.
O'Brien thing, you know,
Yeah,
with Robert
like
Smigel, right? Where he's
yeah,
playing the
like
celebrities.
exactly. Where it's just like it with Madam Web, they're like, well, the lips don't match. Who cares? And then someone was like, hey guys, we got in shit during Madam Web. We at least have to do a lips replacement for the ADR in Craven. And fuck you, we'll bring it full circle. The same thing fucking happens in Killers of the Flower Moon. I noticed it fucking 4 times, dude. You want to bring up Marvel versus Scorsese? I noticed it like 4 fucking times. The worst ADR I've ever heard in my fucking life during
I
that
mean,
movie,
ADR in
and
general, I
is
think
bad,
is
and
bad.
it's necessary, but it's bad. Like I get it. You have to, well, not have to, but you know, making a movie is very hard. I'm not trying to shit on the dialogue editors or editors in general that have to, you know, it's a job sometimes too, and they have to make best of what they're given. And certain times you have to fill in gaps, and you have to try to tell a good story, and you have to try to give exposition and make sure people can follow what's going on. Or you need a piece of dialogue, but you want the scene to flow a certain way. Like I get all of those decisions, I really do. But in all of these examples, there's horrible ADR. I think in all it's awful in all of them, and but the most shocking thing was Killers of the Flower Moon, because like there are no so, and in a theater maybe I wouldn't have noticed it so much, but like on an airplane seat with headphones on when it's right in front of my fucking face, and like and you can, something about wearing headphones watching that movie, you can just, it's recorded badly. Like they don't even sound like it's the same thing. Like I in school I took a fucking, you know, a class on dialogue editing and used Pro Tools, and I'm like, who the this is a Martin Scorsese movie. I understand the Sony Spider-Verse shit because no one gives a fuck doing that probably. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everyone involved on it does care, but they're just like, let's get this fucking thing done. Where Martin Scorsese, I'm like, come on, dude. Like I have, as much as I thought the movie was okay, it was fine, but like I think he has higher standards than that. And I understand sometimes you have to you just got to use ADR. I get it. But and maybe here's another thing on top of it. Now we're just ranting about shit. The what if review ended 10 minutes ago. Uh I'm sure Disney loves this. Um I feel like maybe my ear is tuned to it a lot more than, you know, your average person,
Well,
and I think
you've also
that's,
been trained now. Like you
yes,
can't undo
where
that. Like that's a part of
most people, it's actually quite annoying now because you
yeah.
notice it way more. And I'll be that annoying guy where I'm watching shit with Nevis and I'll go ADR, and she'll go what, and I'll rewind it, and she'll like, oh my god, I hear it now, because like she won't notice it, but then
Yeah.
I'll go, that was fucking ADR. And like
It's easy to notice. Like I find like it's most notable when like you're watching like say a comedy. Like for example, like there's a scene in Men in Black when Will Smith is walking away from the camera, and they wanted like one more comedic line, and so he's saying a comedic line that's clearly recorded in post. But then like there are some times as well where actors, not that they're necessarily phoning it in, but when they're looping their voices and they're in a studio, it sounds clearer than it does
yeah.
if they were to record it on site,
And
right?
that's
Like it,
what I noticed during Killers. And the most egregious thing is they do the Craven thing where I'm pretty sure they fucking CG'd the lips. They fucking removed the mustache from Superman on these people. And it just looks awful. And I'm like, in the Men in Black example or other, most ADR examples, you're cutting to an over the shoulder and you're hearing a line of dialogue or off screen, like you're saying, because that's just kind of the easiest way of getting an ADR line in there without having to fucking do face replacement.
And it's
right?
usually for exposition,
Um,
because you'll have like a test screening for something,
and
and
some
maybe
people
like,
are confused,
we
right?
don't know what this means, or can you explain this better? And then it's like, okay, well, now we got to, well, maybe we
Add a
can't
line.
shoot again
Yeah.
because the actor's not available or what have you. So then,
Or it wouldn't be worth it, right?
yeah, so we'll write it in, and yeah, like you'll cut away and you'll hear the voiceover coming off screen.
And if it's done well, it will sound like it was recorded,
But when is it done well?
with-
It's very rarely
but
done
we
well.
don't notice it. We don't notice it when it's done well. I'm sure there's so many times where we're doing an ADR podcast now, where we just don't notice it. Because guess what? Good ADR, you're never going to notice it. So we only notice the bad stuff. And this has nothing to do with What If. I guess maybe because it's all ADR technically.
Yeah.
And some of it
We were
does
talking
sound
earlier on, right, where some actors sound like they're either recording it off of their phone or like they're just literally phoning it in.
or it's
And
just
they're,
stilted, right? Because they're
yeah,
not engaging with another human, or maybe they are, but the other person's not the actor, so there's no chemistry there. There's nothing like.
it's like a
And I've
recording engineer or something like
I've
that.
tried to read you're someone who reads a teleprompter and reads a script often,
yeah.
right? But
Sure
like,
do.
to me, I find it's more difficult when my sister asks me to read lines for her sometimes when she's doing her auditions for commercials and stuff like that. And I'll just voice note her the lines, and it's fucking hard to sound natural, right? Especially when you're only reading one line of dialogue. It's not flowing, right? Because I feel like if you're memorizing lines and even performing them with another person, there's a flow to that, right? And you can kind of understand how a conversation is supposed to sound realistic when you're going back and forth with someone in one scene. But I feel like when you're reading something out of context, even if it's being regurgitated back to you, it's always just sounds off. And then when you have to, like you said, when they're recording in a voice booth versus Martin Scorsese being probably all practical sets on set recording live, like, sound there, like, there were times where I'm like, that sounded awful. And again, in Craven it's even worse. Madam Web, it's hilarious. It's just I don't know where we were going.
Well,
with
and
all
to
that.
be fair, I think that this is a negative in terms of like Scorsese, not that like ADR isn't new, because it's not, but
Okay,
I do
no.
feel like Scorsese has struggled a little bit with modern technology, or at least
Yeah.
the change when it comes to not even just sound, but like obviously shooting digitally and incorporating a digital component, and the feeling is as though, like, the whole conversation with The Irishman, like, I think The Irishman is a good movie. I don't think it's a masterpiece, and the problem with that film is that it's the motion capture. Like,
Yeah.
they just, the de-aging does not work. And you have somebody that is a smart enough filmmaker who obviously soldiered through it and made the best version that he probably possibly could make. But even someone like that, I don't think, in my opinion, didn't pull it off. And so, I think some filmmakers, when it comes to that, are better at it because, like you're saying, we don't notice it. It's like editing. Like, the best edits are the ones you don't see,
That's
that
the
are
unfortunate thing
seamless.
about a lot of this shit, right? Is like, it's the best stuff. It's going to be like, oh, it sounds good, like, or it looks good, or that all looked natural to me, right? Like
or
it's
what
not.
or what your expectations are. Like, obviously
Yeah,
we've seen enough movies. We've
yeah.
both been to school for broadcasting and film and post-production, and so, like, unfortunately we can't turn that part of our brain off. But
Where
I think
most people
I
can.
think the general public, and any patrons that are going to the movie, I think the movies, I think their expectations, or for TV shows as well, is entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, like, maybe there's, like, a level of expectation for certain things where it's like, oh, I'm not going to judge a movie by dissecting the
Oh, you're not gonna
anatomy of it.
overthink it, right? Or look at
Yeah.
those technical
Like, I
details.
want
Like,
to enjoy seeing a movie star on the big screen, or a film that will distract me from the real world for a couple of hours. I'm not looking for, technical persistence, and
and,
efficiency, and competency. I'm not even going to notice it. Most people don't. We do,
and
and
to
we
be
will always
fair,
notice it. But
the creatives making it also know, right? Like
yeah,
it's not like they're watching it going, that was perfect, right? A lot of the times they go,
they
you
don't
know what?
even know. I think
Or
most people don't even. They either don't care, or they
I
don't
think
really
don't
know.
care closer. I think it's don't care.
Because look at the
Like
Cineplex
I
conversation we've had, even with the theatrical experience of how films are presented to the public, or how people watch movies. Nobody complains anymore about, the sound, really, or
That's true.
proper
People
masking,
aren't
or
gonna notice it. Like even that they don't notice those things that we're
yeah,
talking about, right? But I'm talking about the creatives making it. I know a lot of like you hear editors talk, or maybe even sound designers and things like that. They go, you know what? They know most people won't notice it, so they don't care. That's
yeah,
what I mean. Like they go, listen, no one's gonna fucking notice it. There's gonna be such a small percentage of fucking dorks like me and you, or film critics, or whoever, that are gonna go, that line was 80 yard, or that continuity error, or that their hand placement doesn't match when they're cutting back and forth. It's like, no, the editor used those two shots because those were the best shots to them, and they thought that made for the most engaging scene. um and they don't care that the hand placement is off, or the face, their mouth doesn't match. It's just they know most people are not going to notice that, so they don't care that the 10% of us that do notice it. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So
And also
when they're
that they're
making it,
selling product, right? Like, their bottom
yeah,
line for all of this is like, okay, well, do we have product that we can release into the world and make money off of? And, if it's a stitch job, or if it's like, performing surgery on these things to make it somewhat, like, competent, and creating a Frankenstein cut of a movie, you still have to release it. Like, I even though I think Craven the Hunter is terrible, I still applaud Sony for actually releasing the film, because,
sure.
it didn't become a David Zaslav situation, which it clearly could have been. But at the same time, it's also like, well, what are you doing, JC Shandor? Like, I don't understand even why you decided to make this movie in the first place. There's nothing about this that
Well, you
has
think
any kind of authorship.
the Morbius to Madam Web to this, could have easily them been giving up on this, and like it even, I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually do, but I think
I think
the
they
actual
have. I think it's done.
yeah, they have, but I mean like the actual, they love the character of Spider-Man so much they don't want to give up on that, right?
Yeah.
But they wanted to milk it for more, and it just didn't,
But they had no
quite work.
direction. And even, like, the
Yeah,
conversation about what Spider-Man is in this universe, or is there a Spider-Man in this universe? Because Madam Web made that even more convoluted,
who
and
cares?
perplexing.
That's the ultimate thing, is who cares? And who cares can
That's
be an
the that's
overall
that's the
statement to
new
most
anthology
things.
season. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of what if,
the,
who
the
cares?
Sony Spider-Verse movies is like a whole, like, you could make all the Venom movies, Madam Web, Morbius, and Craven. Who cares?
Ultimately,
The watchers is like, I gotta watch this shit.
ultimately, I mean, who cares can be both a negative and a positive, because like, like bring up something like Carry On, right?
Yeah.
Like Carry On is a who cares, and I saw people complaining on fucking TikTok about Carry On,
I don't know
and
how
like,
good they have it.
well,
Jean-Michel Sarah rules.
I'm just saying, like, people are it's so far fetched. It's like it's so stupid. I'm like, yeah, who
You have a
fucking
duck man
cares?
and a human
Yeah.
woman having a baby. It's
Also,
too
who cares?
far-fetched.
Yeah, Farfetch the Pokemon. Was that an intentional joke or
Yes.
no? Um, I just think who cares should be applied to more things, right? Because like ultimately when you start to nitpick things, and I get that that's part of our job when we're doing this, like I ultimately like I get to a point where I just go, who cares? It's just like who cares? If they want to bring Robert Downey Jr. back, who cares? If they want Howard the fuck, um, who cares? If they want Carry On to be the dumbest fucking thing and just be ridiculous and over the top, that's part of the point of it. These are movies. The most ridiculous things should happen in movies. That doesn't mean you can't have a really realistic movie as well. I just think more people should go, who cares? And then you'll enjoy things more. But then you can also
Man, I
nitpick
would
stuff.
love a season of that where it is all explained with the Sony Spider-Man,
Yeah.
villains. But I think the caring though, in terms of the technical aspect of what we were talking about, is still important. I think
Oh,
like
I agree. And I even if most people won't notice, I still think that it's fair to point out those things
yeah,
and hold people to a standard. And that's both from a storytelling standpoint,
and whether
and
it's
you
Marvel
want
or Martin Scorsese.
yeah, exactly. And you want things to have proper build-ups. You want good character development. You want, good concepts, good characters. You want great stuff from the technical side. That's the point of why me and you love talking about movies. And yeah, sometimes that makes it I guess harder to enjoy things, which is I think why critics get a bad rap of being negative or only liking, different like or not liking a lot of populist kind of entertainment to your point as well. Where I think a lot more of the quote unquote normies can just shut off their brain and enjoy something and maybe fall more into the who cares or like there's a lot of times where I'll be like, oh, I noticed this, and then to for my wife Nevis or someone else I'm talking to, they go, I didn't notice that, didn't bother me, who cares? Like, and I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, fair enough. But I think it is still fair for us to point it out. Anyways, I'm loopy and I really need to like just chill. So that was a very random end to our What If season 3 review. In classic Matt and Eric fashion, we went on a tangent about Martin Scorsese and ADR and the Sony Spider-Man universe of characters that they used in movies. So anyways, thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. I'm running off 3 hours sleep, so if this was if I made no sense, I apologize. I'm in LA right now, both for work and pleasure. So I will be attending WWE Raw, the premiere of WWE Raw on Netflix. As we're recording this, and probably as we post this, I will be going there tonight on Monday for Monday Night Raw. I will return home to do a full report about my trip in LA to WWE Raw, as well as my trip to Disneyland. We'll be continuing our bucket list series with an episode about me going to Disneyland, as well as one on Universal and stuff as well. So yeah, I don't know what the
and
fuck.
and we have year in
Oh yeah,
review
my
in terms
favorite
of best
stuff.
of and most anticipated. So all this month, there's still a lot of stuff, and obviously, people have released their best of lists and most anticipated. We're gonna get there. It's just that like the beginning of the year, we're
It's
getting back
Jan
into the routine.
6th. It's January 6th. What are
Oh
you trying
God.
to throw an insurrection on this podcast?
I knew that was actually. I'm surprised not a lot of people have brought that up today. No, it's tomorrow.
Oh, it's
Oh,
tomorrow. I'm
it's
saying
tomorrow. Yeah.
today because
See,
this is
yeah, because we're
posting.
recording this
Now
on the
you
5th.
ruined it. Now you
Yeah.
ruined it.
Now I've
But,
ruined the illusion. Like I've ruined the Sony Spider-Man villains.
Yeah, so yes, those are two of my favorite episodes. I think we're still early enough in the year that that's fine.
Yeah.
I
And
I wanted to
January itself is such a void of a month, so you
Yeah.
know.
So we will have our best of the year and my favorite episode, which is our most anticipated, where we look back at last year's most anticipated list and then build a new one from scratch for this year. And a couple more interviews coming out as well, right, Eric?
Yes, so I have interviews this month. Actually, the week of that you're listening to this, we'll have interviews up for Better Man with Robbie Williams and director Michael Gracie. The film is expanding on January the 10th. And I think it goes completely wide by the 17th. An interview with Tim Fellbaum for September 5. And we will also have an interview with the writer director of The Seed of the Sacred Fig, Mohammed Rozaloff. And in addition, right now, Matt will post it on the regular website shortly. But if you go to YouTube, the interview with Brady Corbet for The Brutalist is up. I'm trying to think if I have anything else. There's some other things in the works, but they're not done yet or they're not confirmed. So once they are, this month there's a lot of interviews coming up and probably,
Sweet.
yeah. So
Nice.
yeah,
And I'll be going to wrestling. Okay. Thank you all for listening.
high and low, we bring it all.
Please go check out our letterbox, Untitled_movies, over on Blue Sky.
We will also update that too. We swear we will
we
update that.
will. Untitledmoviepodcast.com over on Blue Sky. We're still over on X, Untitled_movies as well.
Did you see they added
Or
like a new
Untitled
thing
Movies.
onto X?
Grok.
Grok.
It's like a fucking
talking
AI
about
thing,
things that
dude.
who cares? It's just like, come on.
God. All right. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.
That's so Craven.
What if?
Who cares?
What if I got some fucking sleep? Bye, everybody.